I'll give a thumbs up. Welcome, Shortridge Blue Devils, to World Changing 101. I am Senior Nevaeh Smith, and today I am here with Dr. Aleesia Johnson. Dr. Aleesia Johnson has been an educator for 18 years. She was named Superintendent for Indianapolis Public Schools, IPS, in June 2019, and is the first African-American woman to serve in this capacity. Aleesia graduated from Agnes Scott College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Psychology and African American Studies. She also holds a Master of Arts in Teaching degree from Oakland City University, a master's degree in social work from the University of Michigan, and a doctorate in education leadership from Oakland City University. She and her husband are the proud parents of 4 children. Hi, Dr. Aleesia Johnson.
Hi, Nevaeh. Happy to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I am so glad to be speaking with you today. So I want to get right in. Describe the steps you took to get to where you are now as the first Black female superintendent of IPS.
Right. So, I will say my path wasn't necessarily a traditional one in some ways, but I have been, as you said, in education for 18 years. I started off as a teacher, a middle school teacher. Most of my actually all of my years in teaching and in school leadership were in middle school. So, you know how you all can be in middle school. Y'all usually are going through some things, but those are my babies. So I started off as a middle school science and social studies teacher. I taught 6th grade, and I was actually taught in New Jersey through a program called Teach for America. So I did that for 2 years, and I'm from Indiana. I'm from Evansville, which is about 3 hours south of Indianapolis. But I wanted to come back closer to home. So I came back to Indianapolis and taught here in the city for 4 more years. And then I was a teacher coach. Then I was an assistant principal and then a principal. And then one day as a principal, got a call from my old boss, our former superintendent, who I actually hadn't met before, but he called and was interested in a conversation. And usually if a superintendent calls you, you take the meeting to see what they want to talk to you about. And he talked about an opportunity in the school district. And so I decided it was something I wanted to do. So I came from my principal role into the district 6 years ago as the innovation officer. And then when he left to go pursue his next superintendency in Washington, D.C., the board asked me to serve as the interim superintendent. Now, I've got to say, I did not in my professional career, I didn't have a goal to go be a superintendent. My goal really was to be a school principal. That's really what I wanted to do. So once I accomplished that, I was like, great, everything else is kind of gravy, because that was the goal I had set for myself. So I found myself surprised, a little bit overwhelmed to be in the place to become the interim superintendent, and had a lot of conversations, a lot of prayer, and decided, you know what, I think maybe I want to do this permanently. And so then I applied to be the permanent superintendent and got appointed June of 2019. So this is just wrapped year 2.
That is great. I love how at a moment you were like, okay, where you were. Like that was it. Like you had reached that goal and that was it. And then a new opportunity comes to you and it's just like, wow, I never would have thought, so that's really great. I want to ask, can you describe the obstacles that you face specifically in your profession as a Black woman, as a female,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, one thing I think about a lot and I'm very humbled by is the fact that I'm the first Black woman to serve in the role in IPS, but I wasn't the first to be qualified to do it, right? So there are women, Black women before me who absolutely could have sat in this seat, who have blazed the trail for me, who had to knock down the barriers, who had to say the hard things that are sometimes hard to say, who had to go out there and do all of the things so I could be sitting where I am today. So I always am humbled and have a huge debt of gratitude to women, particularly Black women, who helped me to get to where I am. I'm not here on my own. I never, ever forget that. And so with that, though, there are those times where I am the only woman in a room, or oftentimes the only Black woman in the room. In Indiana, we have 200-ish school districts in the state of Indiana, I can name on this hand how many other Black women superintendents there are out of more than 200 in our state. So if I'm going to a superintendent's association conference or something like that, I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to be the only one in the room that looks like me. And that can be intimidating because it's like, well, do I speak up? What do I say? Do I now have to represent the whole Black race or all women when I make my statements? You know, those are all questions I have to ask and really have to, you know, make myself and remind myself I belong in this room. I belong here just like everybody else is in this room. I'm fully qualified to be in this room too. And that's something as a woman, oftentimes we have to remind ourselves of. And certainly as people of color, as Black women, we have to remind ourselves of that we belong in the spaces.
Absolutely. I love that because sometimes today I face that, like maybe I am the only Black woman in this room or a Black girl in this room. Maybe I am the only one that looks like me. And so you sort of feel like invalidated at first, but then after pondering those questions in your head, you're like, look, I am here. I am meant to be. So I love that you experienced that as well in your role.
Yeah.
What motivated you to keep going despite these challenges? Like what, you know, constantly rang in your head or what occurred daily that told you to keep going?
Yeah, you know, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the people who did the hard work so I could have this opportunity. So for example, my grandfather on my mom's side, he was really engaged in civil rights in his community. Like, you know, I could pull up the article in the newspaper of when he was arrested for sitting at a lunch counter in a restaurant that he, you know, was advocating. And so he did the hard work. Like he legitimately went to jail. He, you know, legitimately had his name dragged through the board. Ironically, he would go to school board meetings to advocate for the integration of the school system. This is in Kentucky. And the school board would close the door, put him out, and then close the doors. And he would yell from outside the doors what he believed to be what was right for his community. And so that's the kind of person he was. And that's what gets me motivated. And I remind myself of, you know, I come from a powerful line of ancestors. You know, I'm here today because my ancestors had a strength to continue to be resilient through all kinds of challenges that we could never even fully imagine, I don't think. So I can't like be scared. Like I can't be intimidated, right? Like I have to honor them. And I also know there are lots of Nevaehs in the world, and I have to continue to blaze the trail for you. I don't want it to be as hard for you. I don't want you to have to experience all of the challenges I experience. So if I can help, you know, bust through some of those walls for you and make it easier for you, then that's my responsibility too. So we're all connected, and we can never forget that connection that we all have to one another. It's so important.
Yes, absolutely. It feels great to look up to someone who looks like me, you know, in this leadership role, in this position. So it's very inspiring. And I love that you connected it to your ancestors, because I too have ancestors who were activists or who were very persistent in fighting for justice and equality. So I really appreciate that. Absolutely. What advice can you give to young Black girls today, or young Black people, period?
You know, for all of us, I think it's this idea of responsibility, you know, to our ancestors. Like we didn't get here by ourselves. Your parents, your grandparents, even those in your ancestry that you don't know, right? But like all of them contributed to you being where you are. So there is a responsibility we have. And then if we think about the present, the now and then, like none of us make it on our own. You just cannot. You just cannot. It's just not possible. So if you are in a classroom right now, and you look to your left and you look to your right, you need those people around you. If we want to be the kind of community we want to be, if we want to create the conditions where we can all win, then we need each other. And I think that's the other advice I would give to young people is there's enough room for everybody to shine. There's enough room for everybody to win. I promise you, that is the truth. Sometimes we get caught in this mindset of it has to be either or, it has to be me or you. You know, you like this person, I don't like this person. You know, we get into all of that kind of mess instead of orienting ourselves in the fact that we can all win. Like there's enough room, there's enough space for us all to thrive, for us all to be successful. It's not about trying to hoard it and just get yours, right? If I'm only thinking about getting mine, then I'm of no service to the full community. And I know that's a big part of what Shortridge is about. It's about community. It's about service to others. And so that is a huge part of being a leader. You can't lead if you don't have, I mean, I guess you can call yourself a leader, I guess. But if you don't have that orientation of service to others, I don't think you'll be a very effective one.
Absolutely. It's about sticking together. Absolutely. So can you tell me, what is a typical day like in your profession?
Yeah, I have a lot of meetings in my job. When I talk to my kids, they're like, you just are in meetings all day. And oftentimes that is a lot of my day because we're trying to figure out, you know, how do we make the best decisions for you and your teachers and your principals and your schools to set you all up for the best possible success. So I spend a lot of my time in meetings and conversations, visit schools, obviously. So I've gotten to 3 schools this week and just checking in. I was at Shortridge on day 1. I got to ride Indigo with a couple of students. So shout out to the girls who I got to ride in with. And so school visits are a big part of that. And then like meeting with different people on the team. So our academics leaders, our operations leaders, you know, what's happening in food service, what's happening with transportation, what's happening, you know, with our principals, what's happening with the curriculum decisions we're making, all of those kinds of conversations. And then I have to spend a lot. So that's inside IPS. I also spend a lot of time outside IPS. So I think of myself, a big part of my job is to be the chief cheerleader of IPS. Like it is my job to make sure I am shining a light as brightly as I can on all the awesome things we have going on in our school district, because there are a bunch of them. And sometimes I feel like in the community, those things don't get highlighted enough and that story doesn't get told enough. So I'm very passionate about what y'all not gonna do is talk about my schools and my babies and talking about all the awesome things we have going on, because we do. And so it's my job to shout it from the rooftops as much as I can.
Absolutely. So can you give me an example of what a list of goals might look like for the betterment of IPS?
Yep. So one thing that we did last year with our school board is adopted our 2025 strategic plan. So if you go to our website right now, you could click on 2025 strategic plan. And then in June, our board actually adopted goals associated with that plan. So how will we know if we're successful? And there are a lot of academic goals in there. So for example, in high schools, we would move to our graduation rates to at least 87% of our seniors graduating on time. I think we're sitting right around 82 right now. So that would get us either at or exceeding the state average. So that's something in the high school space we're focused on. We're also focused on our freshmen. So those of you who are in your first year at Shortridge, we're tracking what we call freshmen on track. So how are your grades looking? What's your attendance looking like? What's your discipline looking like? Your teachers are monitoring that, because we know if you have a strong first year of high school, the likelihood of you graduating on time increases tremendously. But if you have a rough start and you get behind, it becomes really challenging, not impossible, but more difficult to get to the finish line on time. So in the high school space for first years, tracking how our first year students are doing, credit acquisition grades, all of those things. And then looking at our pathway. So what are students interested in pursuing? How many students are pursuing what? And when it's time to make that choice after 12th grade, knowing if you are engaging in employment, enlistment, or enrollment. And we want to continue to increase those numbers as well. So we know that everybody who walks across the stage is leaving with a plan that's going to give them what they need to live the life they want to live and have the resources they need to live that life.
That sounds great. So I wanted to jump into more specific things. So what are you planning to do to ensure that POC students in IPS feel safe and included?
Yeah. So I think that has to start with you all's voice. So I have a Superintendent Student Advisory Council. We're actually going to grow that this year. We've had like 10 to 15 students who have participated. And I really had a reflection of we actually need to grow that number and engage in more students. They were really helpful to me in identifying we're talking to our friends and there's some mental health challenges that we need to address, or the National Chinese Honor Society at Shortridge, for example, creating their document around advocacy for additional representation and education of Asian Americans in our community. I was able to meet with them. They were able to meet with our race equity team. I know they were able to meet with Mr. Thomas and just advocate for, hey, where are we seen and where are we heard, and continue to push on things we need. So I want those conversations to continue because you all know it better than we do. So yes, I get to make the decision many times, but I have to have the insight from you all to make sure I'm on the right track. So in terms of belonging, we have lots of conversations around, okay, well, what are the curriculum materials? Where do you see yourself showing up in the novels that you're reading, in the history that you're studying? Where do you show up? Where do your ancestors show up in those conversations? Your teachers talk about that often and frequently, I know. I also think there's, how do you see yourself represented with your staff, right? So oftentimes in IPS, we have wonderful educators in our district, but we have work to do in making sure they are more representative of the students that we serve. I did not have a Black teacher ever in my kindergarten through 12th grade experience. And that's ridiculous, right? My children, though, my son, he did not have a Black teacher until 6th grade. He's gone to school in Indianapolis his entire life, not until 6th grade. That's problematic. So if you can't see yourself in the people who are around you, or you only see them in particular roles and positions, then that sends you a message about who belongs in the space, who belongs doing certain things or not. So that's something we also think about is who's in front of our children, how do they represent them, and then, how are you represented in the work that you do every day?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. So how will you ensure that steps are taken to improve the mental health in students and that their voices are heard?
Yeah, this is a big one, especially coming off of COVID, and really not even coming off of it. We're still navigating it. We see the positivity rates and all those things in our community right now are still pretty high. So there's a few things we have in place. One, you have social workers in your building, you have counselors in your building, you have those additional mental health service providers in the building that I would encourage everyone to take advantage of. So I have a master's in social work. I'm a little bit biased in that regard. The reality is literally all of us could benefit from having someone we can talk to just process through our feelings, our emotions, what's going on, all of us, whether you've had a traumatic event happen to you, or the fact is we're all going through this traumatic event of COVID. Most of us know somebody who was, passed away, or who lost their job, or, went through some really tough challenges. That is emotionally taxing on all of us. So I would encourage everyone, take advantage of those mental health services that you have. Who's a trusted adult in your building you can talk to? I think for us as adults, the question I ask our principals, does every student in your building know that someone knows them, values them? Do they feel seen and known? Can we say for about every student, one of us grown-ups has a pulse on that particular student and has a relationship so that student can feel valued? If we can answer that question and say yes for 100% of our students, then we've put ourselves in a pretty good position to make sure that you all are feeling loved and cared for and supported. So I think outside of the formal services that we have in our schools, we have social emotional learning champions who are talking about, how do we make sure in our community, we're building community in our classrooms. You all have ATL that you're talking about, hey, how are we doing as a community, that you're showing up for one another in really powerful and supportive ways, that you're going out and doing service together. All of that builds community and at the end of the day strengthens the mental health and the emotional health of everyone.
Absolutely. So we do have a little bit of time left. It's gone by so fast. I appreciate every response. Right now, I want to look at the questions in the chat, starting with this question from a media student. Was your career journey linear leading up to your current position?
That's a good question. It was pretty linear. I will tell you the one thing that was not linear, and anybody who knows me is like, that doesn't even sound like anything you would do. So when I graduated from undergraduate, when I graduated from Agnes Scott, that's an all-women's college right outside Atlanta, I went and I was a sales representative at IBM, which I sold servers, so computer servers to small healthcare companies, which literally anyone who knows me is like, that is just not even who you are. And it wasn't. But when I was a senior in college, you're trying to figure out what's next, and we could do practice interviews on my college campus. And so I said, well, IBM was coming. That's a good company, good reputation, solid job. So I said, well, I'm just going to do this practice interview just to practice my interview skills. And I ended up getting a job. And my parents said, well, you know what? You're about to have your car note. You're going to have to be able to pay for where you live. They're offering you a pretty good salary. You better take that job. So I did. But after a year, I even less than a year, I knew it wasn't the right fit for me. It wasn't really aligned with like my personal kind of philosophy. I knew I wanted to be doing something that was more oriented into service to others. Like I wasn't quite sure exactly how, but I knew selling technology wasn't going to be my path because that just wasn't what my personal sort of philosophical, like how I want to spend my time. It didn't line up. So, so that part was not linear. So then I went to social work school and then I got an education, and that part has been pretty linear. So I think there's a couple lessons there. One is if you get yourself into something that just doesn't feel like it's the thing for you, you can choose to do something else. That is possible, right? You can make a different choice. And two is sometimes you do have to try something to see if it is for you or not, because you might discover something that you didn't realize. So it's both okay to try it. You should try something. And also if it's not for you, you should feel free to go find the thing that fits with you better. And as a grown-up, you'll probably experience that a few times.
So another question for Ms. If you were not working in education, what profession would you be?
If I wasn't formally in education, I probably would be in social work. I don't know if I would be like doing direct practice, meaning working one-on-one with clients, but I would probably be in some sort of nonprofit, community-based organization like that. That's my jam.
Yes. Sounds good. So another question is, what is your advice to high school seniors?
Ooh. Good question. So stay focused. It's very easy to get senioritis. I know it's week 1 for you all, but to say like, I'm just gonna kind of chill or get through all your credits and then go into autopilot mode. I would discourage that and say like, stay focused throughout the course of the year. Because the reality is whether you're going into the workforce or you're going on to college, certainly if you're going into the military, you're going to need those habits. Like you're going to need to keep the habits you have now. You're just going to use them in a little bit of a different way, but you can't lose that sort of focus that you are forced to have when you're in school. So I would definitely encourage the staying focused, staying on your game, not letting yourself slide or get too comfortable. And then I would say, you know, you've got a group of new first-year students into your building. You've got others. Y'all are the king and queens of the castle right now. How are you setting an example for everyone else? They're looking at you whether you want them to or not. So you are setting the tone. So set the tone that you think is the right tone for your school community and be those leaders. Everybody can lead from whatever position you are in. You are leading Nevaeh in this moment. You are holding space in this conversation with me. You are, as a senior, a young Black woman, sort of demonstrating what it means to be confident and be poised and be able to hold your own in a conversation with the leader of the district. That's powerful. There's a lot of power in that. So continuing to model that for others, I think, would be advice. And then have fun, right? Like, stay focused, but have fun. It's a really fun year. You get to make a lot of memories. Hopefully COVID will not put too much of a damper on that. This is your last year all together as a class. So enjoy one another and have fun.
Thank you for that. Greatly appreciated. I want to ask maybe 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So we know that this is another question from a student. We know that your kid goes to Shortridge, right?
Yeah, but he's going to remain anonymous.
And
Yes.
That's understandable. What made you guys choose Shortridge?
I think for me, it was this focus on service and community and inquiry and curiosity. Like, there's a huge world that we all are a part of. And so if we are sort of keeping ourselves curious about the world around us and doing that in a way that honors and celebrates community and diversity, that's, to me, is amazing. That gives you the sort of thinking frame you will need for college, for the world beyond this place. You'll be able to take that kind of thinking and approach to the world. You'll be able to carry it with you everywhere. So for me, that was a really important part of what Shortridge offers to students. I also love the arts. And so the opportunity to engage in the arts was really important to me. And, you know, there are a lot of teachers at Shortridge whose own children also go to Shortridge. And I think it's really powerful when you have people in your school and they make the choice of that school for their kids. That sends a really powerful message that this is a place that's really.
Absolutely. So last question, how do you think we can address or conquer the struggles of COVID?
Oh, man. Well, let me say this. If you are over 12, which should be everybody listening right now, please, please, please get vaccinated. Please. We're at about a 43% vaccination rate as a community right now. And here's the thing. Like, we won't be able to not be interrupted with quarantining and staying at home for 10 days and all of that if we don't get our vaccination rates up higher as a full community. It is just the reality of the situation. That is just what it is. So that's the biggest encouragement that all of you can actually contribute by getting vaccinated, number one. And then number two is we're going to have to continue to be flexible just like we were last year. It is going to be a part of the game. So there will be things that I know inevitably are going to shift or change because we're going to learn something new, or the community around us is going to change in some way, and we're going to have to change with it. So everyone's going to have to continue to keep a flexible mindset. But please get vaccinated if you're not already. Please wear your mask appropriately to keep us protected. Those are small things we can all do to help make us safer.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you so much for being here with me today and conversing with me. it was very delightful, and I'm so happy to have spoken with you. We'd love to see you again.
Absolutely. I would love to be back again. I was following all of you yesterday, or following the Shortridge Twitter account yesterday, so I do want to just say y'all made me so incredibly proud with your day of service yesterday. My heart was full in seeing all the ways you all were impacting the city of Indianapolis yesterday. So if you haven't heard it from anybody else, please know you made Superintendent Johnson so proud to represent IPS, when I know I have young people like you all who are making such a difference in our community. And I could not be more proud. And Nevaeh, girl, you are amazing. Look, we are in good hands. We are in good hands. So you do whatever it is in this world you want to do, because clearly you have the ability to do so. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, guys, that concludes World Changing 101 with Dr. Aleesia Johnson. Bye, guys.